There is a version of you that only exists between midnight and 3 in the morning. A version that replays conversations from 6 years ago. A version that rewrites arguments you never had. A version that questions every decision you have ever made, every word you have ever spoken, and every silence you chose when you should have said something. And the strange part is, this version of you does not show up during the day. During the day, you function, you smile, you work, you respond to messages and carry the shape of someone who has it all figured out. But the moment the world goes quiet and the lights go off and there is nothing left between you and your own mind, it begins. The loop, the spiral, the endless replay of every possible outcome of a situation that may never even happen. If this is you, if you have spent more nights arguing with your own thoughts than sleeping through them, then this is not a flaw. This is not weakness, and this is not something you chose. There is real, documented psychology behind why your brain does this, and understanding it might be the first step toward finally making peace with the mind that refuses to let you rest. This is the psychology of people who overthink everything at night. Before we go deeper, you need to hear something that no one has probably told you. The fact that your brain refuses to shut down at night does not mean you are broken. It means your mind processes the world at a depth that most people will never understand. Research in cognitive psychology shows that people who engage in repetitive, ruminative thinking tend to score significantly higher on measures of analytical intelligence. A study published in the journal Personality and Individual Differences found that individuals with higher verbal intelligence were more likely to experience worry and rumination, especially during unstructured time like the hours before sleep. In other words, your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is not the thinking. The problem is the timing. During the day, your conscious mind is occupied. You are solving problems, responding to stimuli, managing social interactions, and meeting deadlines. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function and rational thought, is fully engaged. But at night, when external demands disappear, your brain does not simply turn off. Instead, it shifts into what neuroscientists call the default mode network. The default mode network is a system of interconnected brain regions that activates when you are not focused on the outside world. It is responsible for self-referential thinking, mental time travel, and emotional processing. And for people who overthink, this network is hyperactive. This means that the moment you lie down and close your eyes, your brain does not rest. It launches into a review of your entire emotional history. It pulls up unresolved conflicts. It simulates future conversations. It runs probability calculations on outcomes you cannot control. And because there is no external stimulus to interrupt it, the loop continues, sometimes for hours. You are not choosing this. Your brain is wired this way. And the first step to changing the pattern is understanding that this is neurology, not a character defect. Now here is the part that most people never consider. The reason your brain spirals at night almost always traces back to something that happened long before you were old enough to understand it. Clinical psychologists have identified a strong correlation between nighttime overthinking and early childhood environments that were emotionally unpredictable. If you grew up in a household where the emotional atmosphere could shift without warning, where a parent's mood determined whether the evening would be peaceful or painful, your brain learned something very specific at a very young age. It learned that safety required constant monitoring. Children who grow up in emotionally volatile homes develop what psychologists call hypervigilance. Their nervous system becomes permanently tuned to detect threat. They learn to read facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, and even the sound of footsteps. And they carry this skill into adulthood, where it no longer serves them the way it once did. During the day, this hypervigilance gets channeled into productivity, empathy, social awareness, and problem solving. But at night, when there are no faces to read and no situations to navigate, the hypervigilant brain turns inward. It begins scanning your own behavior for mistakes. It begins replaying social interactions to check whether you said the wrong thing. It begins running worst-case scenarios about your relationships, your career, your future, and your worth. This is not anxiety in the clinical sense, although it often gets labeled that way. This is a survival mechanism that was installed in childhood and never received an update. Your brain is still protecting you from a danger that no longer exists. And the cruelest part is that the very intelligence and emotional depth that make you good at understanding others are the same qualities that make your nights unbearable. There is also a hormonal component. Cortisol, the stress hormone, follows a natural circadian rhythm. It peaks in the early morning and drops to its lowest levels at night. But for chronic overthinkers, this cortisol curve is often flattened, meaning stress hormones remain elevated even when the body is supposed to be winding down. This creates a biological contradiction. Your body is tired, but your brain is chemically wired to stay alert, and that is why you can feel physically exhausted and mentally wired at the exact same time. Here is where it gets interesting. Nighttime overthinking does not happen randomly. It follows a very specific and predictable pattern, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. The cycle begins with what psychologists call a trigger thought. This is usually a single, seemingly minor memory or concern that surfaces the moment external stimulation drops. It might be something someone said to you earlier that day. It might be an email you forgot to respond to. It might be a look someone gave you that you could not quite interpret. Under normal circumstances, a healthy brain would acknowledge this thought, assign it low priority, and move on. But an overthinking brain does something different. It attaches emotional weight to the thought. It asks, what if this means something? What if I made a mistake? What if they are upset with me? What if this changes everything? This is the second stage of the cycle, which cognitive behavioral therapists call catastrophic interpretation. The brain takes a neutral event and assigns it the worst possible meaning. And once that meaning is assigned, the brain treats it as fact. The third stage is rumination. This is where the loop begins. The brain replays the trigger event over and over, each time adding a new layer of emotional intensity. It constructs conversations you wish you had. It imagines responses you might receive. It builds entire narratives around a single moment that, in reality, probably meant nothing. The fourth and final stage is physiological arousal. The emotional intensity of the rumination activates your sympathetic nervous system. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow, your muscles tense, and now your body is in a state of low-level fight or flight, making sleep physiologically impossible. This is why counting sheep does not work. This is why telling yourself to just stop thinking is useless. This is why melatonin does not always help. Because the problem is not a lack of sleepiness. The problem is that your brain has entered a self-reinforcing loop where each thought generates an emotion, each emotion generates a physical response, and each physical response generates another thought. You are not bad at sleeping. You are trapped in a cycle that was never designed to be broken from the inside. A landmark study conducted at Baylor University found that people who wrote down their to-do list for the following day before bed fell asleep an average of 9 minutes, faster than those who wrote about tasks they had already completed. This suggests that unfinished business, things your brain perceives as unresolved, is one of the primary drivers of nighttime rumination. This connects to what psychologist Bluma Zygarnik discovered nearly a century ago. The Zygarnik effect states that the human brain remembers incomplete tasks far more vividly than completed ones. Your brain is essentially running an open tab for every unresolved thought, and at night, when all other tabs are closed, those open tabs demand your attention. Neuroscientific research using functional magnetic resonance imaging has also revealed that the amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center, becomes more reactive when sleep deprived. This creates a vicious cycle. Overthinking prevents sleep, and lack of sleep makes overthinking worse. The amygdala becomes 60% more reactive after just one night of poor sleep, according to research published in the journal Current Biology. Additionally, a study from the University of California, Berkeley found that during REM sleep, the brain processes and integrates emotional experiences from the day. When overthinking delays or disrupts REM sleep, those emotional experiences remain unprocessed, which means they carry over into the next night with even greater intensity. This explains why overthinkers often feel like their problems compound over time. It is not that their problems are actually getting worse. It is that their brain is accumulating unprocessed emotional data night after night, creating an ever-growing backlog of thoughts that demand resolution. The science is clear. Nighttime overthinking is not a personality flaw. It is a neurological pattern with identifiable triggers, predictable stages, and measurable consequences. And understanding this pattern is the foundation for changing it. Now, let us talk about what this actually feels like, because the science is important, but the experience is what matters. You lie down, the room is dark, the house is quiet, and for a brief moment, there is peace. But then, like a whisper that grows into a scream, a thought appears. It starts small. Did I lock the door? Did I say the wrong thing at dinner? Why did they look at me like that? And before you can catch it, the thought multiplies. It branches into 10 directions at once. Suddenly, you are not just thinking about what you said at dinner. You are thinking about every awkward thing you have ever said. You are questioning your friendships. You are doubting your career. You are wondering whether you are even a good person. Your chest tightens. Your jaw clenches. You turn over. You check the time. It is 2:17 in the morning, and you have to be up in 4 hours, and you know that thinking about how little sleep you are getting is only making it worse. But you cannot stop because your brain has decided that right now, at this exact moment, is the perfect time to reevaluate your entire life. And the loneliest part is that no one knows. Because tomorrow morning you will get up, you will drink your coffee, you will answer your messages, and when someone asks how you slept, you will say fine. Because how do you explain to someone that your own mind held you hostage for 4 hours over a conversation that happened in 2017? This is the silent weight that overthinkers carry, not the dramatic kind of suffering that earns sympathy, not the visible kind that people rally around, but the quiet, invisible, grinding kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting a battle every single night against an opponent that lives inside your own head. And if this is your life, you are not weak. You are one of the strongest people in the room, because you show up every single day carrying a weight that no one can see, and you do it without ever asking anyone to help you carry it. Here is what most people, including many therapists, get wrong about nighttime overthinking. They treat it as a symptom. They prescribe sleep hygiene tips. They tell you to avoid screens before bed. They suggest herbal tea, white noise machines, and weighted blankets. And while these things can help at the margins, they completely miss the root cause. Because nighttime overthinking is not a sleep problem. It is an unprocessed emotion problem. It is a boundary problem. It is an identity problem. And in many cases, it is a grief problem. The thoughts that keep you awake are not random. They are messages. They are your subconscious mind's way of telling you that something in your waking life needs attention. Maybe you are staying in a relationship that no longer serves you. Maybe you are tolerating a job that is slowly eroding your sense of self. Maybe you have been so focused on surviving that you forgot to ask yourself whether you are actually living. The thoughts that spiral at 3 in the morning are often the truths you refuse to face at 3 in the afternoon. And this is why sleep hygiene alone will never fix it, because you can create the perfect sleep environment, dark room, cool temperature, lavender pillow spray, but if the life you are waking up to is one that your subconscious mind is trying to escape from, no amount of chamomile tea will silence the thoughts. The real solution is not to quiet the mind. The The real solution is to listen to what the mind is trying to say and then have the courage to act on it during the day so that it does not have to scream at you during the night. So what can you actually do? Not generic advice. Real, the evidence-based strategies that work with your brain instead of against it. First, practice what psychologists call scheduled worry time. This is a technique from cognitive behavioral therapy where you designate 15 minutes during the evening, not at bedtime, but a few hours before, to deliberately sit with your worries. Write them down. Let them exist on paper instead of in your head. Research shows that externalizing thoughts reduces their emotional intensity by up to 40%. Second, close your mental tabs before bed. Remember the Zeigarnik effect. Your brain fixates on the unfinished. So before you sleep, write down 3 things that are unresolved and 1 small action you will take for each one tomorrow. This gives your brain permission to release them. Third, practice the cognitive diffusion technique from acceptance and commitment therapy. When a thought appears, instead of engaging with it, simply observe it and label it. Say to yourself, I am having the thought that I said something wrong. This creates psychological distance between you and the thought, reducing its emotional power. Fourth, address the real issue. If the same theme keeps appearing in your nighttime spirals, that is not random noise. That is signal. If you keep thinking about a relationship, that relationship needs attention. If you keep thinking about your career needs a change. The thoughts will not stop until the underlying issue is acknowledged. You were never meant to fight your own mind. You were meant to understand it. And the night is not your enemy. It is the only time your mind has your full, undivided attention. The question is whether you will listen. If you made it to the end of this, there is something about you that you should know. You are not broken. You are not too much. And the fact that your mind refuses to rest is not a curse. It is evidence that you carry a depth that most people will never access. The world tells you to sleep it off, to think less, to just relax. But the world was not designed for minds like yours. And that is not your failure. That is the world's limitation. You were given a mind that notices what others miss, that feels what others ignore, and that remembers what others forget. And yes, that mind keeps you awake sometimes. But it is also the mind that writes poetry at midnight, that solves problems in the shower, and that understands people on a level that most cannot reach. So tonight, when the thoughts come, do not fight them, do not hate them, and do not hate yourself for having them. Instead, take a breath and whisper to your own mind, I hear you. I will deal with this tomorrow. And then, gently, slowly, let the night be what it was always meant to be, a place of rest, not war. His is unspoken minds. And if you felt something while listening to this, you are exactly where you are supposed to be.